G'day everyone, and welcome to our deep dive into Australia. You guys have given us some awesome sources this time around, even some pieces of the Wikipedia article on Australia, and we are so ready to jump in and uncover what makes this land down under so unique.
It's fascinating, right? Like, it really is this one-of-a-kind combo of, like, a continent and a country, the smallest continent, but then it's the sixth largest country if you go by area.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
Okay, so that leads to this concept of Australia as an island continent, which I've definitely heard before.
Yeah, exactly.
But it makes you think, right? Because an island makes it sound small.
Yeah.
But it's massive. So how does that actually work?
Well, it is completely surrounded by water, that's true, but it's so big that it just gets classified as a continent.
Okay, that makes sense.
And one of your sources actually pointed out something I didn't even realize. The coastline is more than 34,000 kilometers long.
Wow.
To put that in perspective, that's like almost twice the length of the equator.
That's neat.
And then on top of that, Australia also claims this massive exclusive economic zone. So it's like they have control over this huge area of ocean surrounding the continent.
Oh, I see, I see. Yeah. Now, hold on. I also saw something about an Antarctic territory claim.
Oh, yeah.
Does that add even more to Australia's territory?
That's where things get a little tricky.
Okay.
Australia claims a big chunk of Antarctica, but it's not recognized internationally. So
Yeah.
it's a whole geopolitical debate. But, even without it, Australia's reach is huge.
Yeah, it sounds like we've definitely got the size down. But, okay, what about all those nicknames? Oz, stray down under the great southern land, the lucky country.
Oh, yeah. And don't forget the sunburnt country and the wide brown land.
Right.
Those are actually inspired by this poem called My Country by Dorothea McKellar.
Oh, cool.
These nicknames give us a glimpse into how Australians see their land right. This place of beauty, but also harsh conditions, full of surprises and opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. For
Right.
sure. They paint quite a picture. But before all the nicknames and the explorers even got there,
All right.
there's a much deeper history there.
Oh, absolutely. Humans have been living in Australia for a really long time. We're talking like 50,000 to 65,000 years.
What?
Yeah, that's before the peak of the last ice age even.
That's incredible.
And we see evidence of this at places like the Majid rock shelter. And then there's the Lake Mungo remains, which are some of the oldest human remains found anywhere.
That really puts things in perspective.
Yeah,
And from those ancient beginnings, we see the rise of Aboriginal Australian culture.
exactly. And it's actually considered one of the oldest continuous cultures on the entire planet. It's an incredible story of survival and resilience.
Yeah, it really is. And it's a culture so deeply connected to the land. In our sources, they talk about this idea of the dreaming.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? It seems so central to their culture.
It really is. It's like fundamental to their spirituality. And it's a complex concept encompassing the creation of the world, the role of ancestral beings and this interconnectedness of all things.
It's so interesting.
Yeah, and it's not just about the past either. The dreaming actually guides their laws, social structures, and ceremonies, making sure that life and their relationship with the land continues.
That's amazing how it's helped preserve their culture for so long, even with all the changes that have happened over time.
Definitely, it speaks to the strength and resilience of their culture. And, while European colonization definitely disrupted their way of life, it's legally acknowledged now.
Right.
The Mabo v. Queensland case was a huge step forward because it overturned this concept of terra nullius, which basically meant land belonging to no one.
Wow.
And it recognized native title for the first time.
Okay, so that's a huge deal.
Yeah, huge.
So the effects of colonization are definitely still being felt today.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about the arrival of Europeans in Australia?
Sure. So the Dutch were the first ones to actually record their presence there, and they arrived in the early 17th century.
Okay.
A guy named Willem Jan Zoon was captaining a ship called the Doifkin, and he charted the Australian coast and encountered Aboriginal people.
Wow.
He sighted Cape York Peninsula, and they named the land New Holland.
New Holland. Interesting.
Yeah.
But they didn't settle there, right?
No, they didn't. Their focus was kind of elsewhere at that time. So it wasn't until 1770 that the British started colonizing under Captain James Cook. And that's what really marked a turning point for Australia and the Aboriginal people who were already there.
And that's how Australia became a penal colony, right? They were
Yeah.
sending convicts from Britain to serve their sentences there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's wild how a penal colony transformed into a nation.
Totally.
A lot of those convicts, once they were freed, actually integrated into colonial society.
Wow.
There were, of course, some uprisings,
Right.
including the 1808 Rum Rebellion. Have you heard of that one?
The Rum Rebellion. That sounds more like a party than a rebellion. What happened there?
Well, it's actually Australia's only successful coup d'etat.
What?
Yeah, the New South Wales Corps, they overthrew the governor, and it all centered around rum,
It was about rum.
the control of the rum trade.
Wow.
It shows you how important rum was to the early colony, even enough to spark a rebellion.
I guess you could say things were a little different back then, so it seems like Australia had a bit of a Wild West phase, too.
Yeah, the gold rushes of the 1850s definitely brought that feeling. The discovery of gold led to a ton of people from all over the world coming to Australia hoping to strike it rich.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
And this rapid population growth changed the social landscape and led to some unrest as well.
Okay, I can see how a massive influx of people would shake things up. What kind of unrest came out of the gold rushes?
Well, there were some tensions between the new arrivals and those who were already living in the colony. A good example of that is the Eureka Rebellion of 1854. The miners revolted against what they thought were unfair mining license fees.
Oh, wow.
And it actually ended up being a key moment in Australia's journey toward becoming a democracy.
It's interesting how those gold rushes tie back to the push for democracy and even unrest about mining specifically. There was definitely this strong desire for self-governance at the time, right?
You're absolutely right. The 6 separate colonies were increasingly managing their own affairs. They were gaining more and more autonomy while still being part of the British Empire.
Right, and that eventually led to federation in 1901 and the establishment of the Commonwealth of Australia.
Exactly.
That's a huge leap from a penal colony to an independent nation.
It really is. It's a testament to the spirit of the Australian people and their drive to make their own destiny.
Yeah, that's amazing. But all this progress definitely came at a cost. We can't forget about the impact that colonization had and continues to have on the Aboriginal population.
It's a tragic and complex part of Australia's history. Following European arrival, the indigenous population experienced a really devastating decline, mainly because of diseases brought by the colonists.
Oh,
And this, along with ongoing conflict and displacement from their land, had a profound and lasting impact on Aboriginal communities.
and adding to that was the fact that no formal treaties were ever actually signed between British authorities and Aboriginal groups.
Yeah, that's a clear example of the terrible consequences of colonization.
Yeah.
There were also these forced assimilation policies which led to Aboriginal children being taken from their families.
Right.
And the trauma of that period, which is known as the stolen generations, it still affects communities today.
It's a painful legacy that Australia is still working to address.
It is. It reminds us how important it is to understand history and its lasting impacts on people and cultures.
So let's move into the 20th century.
Yeah.
Australia became involved in a lot of major global conflicts, right?
Yes, they were. In both world wars, the Korean War, the Malayan Emergency, and the Vietnam War.
Australia has this reputation for having a really strong military, even though it's relatively small.
Yeah, their defense force, which they call the ADF, is very professional and well equipped. They've got a history of participating in international missions and are recognized for their abilities and commitment.
But, with no immediate threats from any neighboring countries, what drives their military focus?
Well, their defense strategy goes beyond just immediate threats. They work to maintain stability in the region, deter any potential adversaries, and protect their interests in the ocean, maritime interests.
Right.
They also play a key role in disaster relief and humanitarian aid, both in Australia and internationally.
Wow. So it's not just about preparing for war, but also being a force for good in the world.
Exactly. It reflects Australia's broader goals when it comes to foreign policy and their desire to play a positive role in the Indo-Pacific region and globally.
And that makes sense. It sounds like their military is seen as more than just a fighting force. It's an important tool in international relations and a symbol of their commitment to peace and stability.
Absolutely. And, that brings us to another fascinating aspect of Australia, their unique approach to foreign policy.
Okay, so how does their foreign policy work?
Well, historically, they've had strong ties with the U.S. and the U.K. as part of something called the Anglosphere.
Right?
But things are changing.
Oh, how so?
Well, in recent years, they've been increasingly engaging with Asian nations, especially China, which is now their biggest trading partner.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense geographically. Australia is right in the middle of the Asia-Pacific region.
Exactly. Their location has definitely influenced their focus when it comes to foreign policy. They're also active members of international organizations like the UN and the World Trade Organization, and they've been more and more involved in peacekeeping and humanitarian efforts.
So they're really trying to balance their traditional alliances with these growing economic and political interests in the Asia-Pacific.
Yeah, it's a delicate balancing act for sure, navigating all the complexities of the 21st century.
For sure. Speaking of complexities, I'm curious about their political system. The sources say it's a constitutional monarchy.
Yeah.
So does that mean the Queen of England still runs the show?
Well, technically, the head of state is the British monarch, which is now King Charles III, but his role is mostly ceremonial. The real power is with the Australian Parliament and the Prime Minister, who is the head of government.
Okay, so it's like a blend of British tradition and Australian democracy.
Yeah, exactly. They have a parliament based on something called the Westminster system, which means there are two houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate.
Right.
The Prime Minister is the leader of the party or coalition that has the majority in the House of Representatives.
Okay, I see. And how is the Prime Minister chosen? Do they have elections like we do?
Yeah, Australians vote for their representatives, and they actually have this system of compulsory voting.
What does that mean?
It means it's illegal not to vote.
Really?
Yeah, so everyone has to
Huh.
vote. This leads to high voter turnout, obviously, and makes their elections some of the most representative in the world.
Yeah, I read about that. That's so interesting how countries approach voting so differently. But back to the government structure for a sec. I also saw something about territories.
Oh, yeah.
How do those work in relation to the states?
So Australia has 6 states which are self-governing and have their own parliaments and laws, but territories have less autonomy and are governed by the federal government.
So it's like a layered system with the federal government having the final say.
Exactly. There's a division of powers with the federal government handling national issues like defense and foreign affairs, while the states take care of things like education and healthcare.
It sounds like a pretty complex system, but it's designed to balance power and representation.
Yeah, it's evolved over time, but it's been pretty effective in providing stable governance and a framework for democratic decision-making.
But even in a democracy, there are always questions about how power is used. I was struck by how Australia handles foreign policy. It seems very centralized, with a lot of power in the hands of the Prime Minister.
Yeah, you're right. The Prime Minister plays a dominant role and often consults with a small group of advisors within the National Security Committee.
That's interesting. Does the Parliament have any say in these matters?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. Parliament actually doesn't have a formal role in foreign policy.
What?
Yeah, even declaring war rests with the executive government, meaning the Prime Minister and their cabinet.
Wow.
It's a system that definitely values quick action, but some people argue it lacks transparency.
That's a good reminder that even in democracies, power can be concentrated in some unexpected ways. So, what are some of Australia's key foreign policy priorities these days?
Well, we already talked about their increasing engagement with Asia, which is super important for their economic and political future. But they also still value those traditional alliances with the US and the UK. So balancing these relationships while also addressing those big global challenges like climate change and security threats, that's going to be a major focus for Australian foreign policy in the years to come.
It sounds like they have a lot on their plate,
They do.
but from everything we've learned so far, Australia seems like they're up to the challenge. They've navigated huge transitions in their history, from a penal colony to an independent nation, from being predominantly European to a vibrantly multicultural society.
And don't forget, they've done all of that while developing this unique national identity that's admired and envied around the world.
Okay, let's dive into that a little bit. What are some of the things that define Australian culture?
One thing that really stands out is their strong sense of mateship.
Mateship. Is that just like friendship, but with an Aussie twist?
It's more than just friendship. It's about loyalty, camaraderie, and looking out for each other. It's really ingrained in their society, and it's something they're very proud of.
Yeah. So it goes beyond just hanging out with your buddies. It's
Mhm.
like a core value that shapes their interactions and their sense of community.
Exactly, and it goes hand in hand with their egalitarian spirit and their sense of fair play.
Mm-hmm.
Australians value honesty, hard work, and a good sense of humor.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
You can see these values reflected in everything from their laid-back attitude to how competitive they are on the sporting field.
Right.
Yeah.
I've also heard that Australians have a really strong connection to the land, even those who live in cities.
Oh, absolutely. Australia's vast and diverse landscapes have really shaped their national identity, from the rugged outback to the stunning coastlines. They have a deep appreciation for the natural world, and you see this reflected in their art, music, and literature.
Oh, that's cool. Speaking of art, the sources mentioned that Aboriginal art has gotten international recognition.
Oh, yeah. It's a powerful art form that tells stories of the land, their ancestors, and their spiritual beliefs, and they often use ancient symbols and techniques that have been passed down through generations.
That's incredible. But what about contemporary Australian art? What are some of the things that are happening there?
Well, Australian artists are known for being bold and innovative.
Oh, cool.
They take inspiration from their surroundings and their multicultural heritage, and you can really see that in their art.
Is there like a particular style that's dominant, or is it more diverse than that?
It's incredibly diverse. You'll find everything from abstract expressionism to contemporary landscape painting, and there's even a thriving street art scene in cities like Melbourne and Sydney.
Wow, so there's a real mix of traditional and modern influences.
Yeah, you could say that Australian art is a reflection of the country itself,
Huh.
a vibrant blend of old and new, familiar and unexpected, with a dash of rebellious creativity thrown in.
Okay, now we had to talk about music.
Yeah.
I get the feeling that Australians are pretty passionate about their tunes.
Oh, they are. Music is a huge part of Australian culture. They have a rich musical history, from those folk songs of the bush to the iconic rock bands that hit the international scene in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, for sure. And today the music scene is super diverse, right?
Oh, yeah, incredibly. You'll find everything from indie rock and electronic music to hip hop and country.
Wow.
There's really something for everyone.
It's interesting. When I think of Australian music, I think of a certain rawness and honesty to it.
I think that's a great observation. Australian musicians often have a distinct sound, and it's that raw energy and honesty that really makes them stand out.
It's like they're not afraid to be themselves, both in their music and in their lives.
Exactly. It's that authenticity that makes Australian culture so appealing.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground, but we're just getting started. There's still so much more to explore about Australia.
In our next part, we'll get into the everyday lives of Australians, their quality of life, their social systems, and their unique approach to balancing work and leisure.
Sounds like we're in for a fascinating deep dive into the heart of Australian society. I can't wait.
Me neither. It's going to be good.
We've talked about Australia's history, their political system, even touched on their unique culture. But I'm curious, what's it actually like to live in Australia?
Well, from what I've gathered from your sources, Australians seem to enjoy a very high quality of life.
Okay.
They consistently score well in global surveys on things like healthcare, education, overall well-being.
I did see that Australia has a universal healthcare system called Medicare. Can you tell me more about that? Does it actually work?
Yeah, so it's a publicly funded system that aims to provide affordable healthcare for everyone in Australia.
Okay.
And Medicare covers a wide range of services like doctor's visits, hospital stays. They even cover prescription drugs and mental health care.
Wow, that sounds pretty comprehensive.
Yeah.
It's definitely different from how healthcare works in a lot of other developed countries.
Yeah.
Are there any downsides to this kind of system or challenges that they face?
Well, like any system, there are always going to be debates and discussions about how to improve it. Some people argue that wait times for certain procedures can be quite long,
Right.
and there are definitely concerns about rising costs of healthcare in general. But overall, I think Australians tend to be quite proud of their universal healthcare system.
It does seem like a system that really prioritizes making sure everyone has access to healthcare regardless of their income.
Yeah, that's the core idea behind it. And speaking of access, Australia also has a strong public education system.
Okay.
Both primary and secondary education are free and compulsory.
It makes sense that a country with such a high quality of life would prioritize education. Do their schools do well compared to other countries?
Yeah, they do. They consistently rank well in international comparisons, and Australian universities are highly regarded globally, and they attract a lot of international students.
Oh, wow.
Education is seen as a key investment both for individuals and for the country's future.
So it sounds like Australians are well educated and well cared for. Now I have to ask, do they have a good work-life balance? Are they all about work, or do they know how to relax and enjoy life?
Well, Australians definitely value their leisure time.
Okay.
They're known for their love of the outdoor sports, spending time with family and friends.
So is there any truth to the stereotype of Australians knocking off early for a Barbie with their mates?
Well, there's definitely a strong culture of socializing and enjoying life outside of work. I think Australians believe in working hard, but they also believe in playing hard.
Right.
They
Yeah.
have a strong sense of community, and you can see this in their social gatherings and how they celebrate.
Yeah, that sounds pretty great. From everything we've talked about, it seems like a pretty awesome lifestyle.
Yeah.
But what about the cost of living? Is it expensive to live in Australia?
It can be, yeah. The cost of living can be high in major cities like Sydney and Melbourne, especially when it comes to housing.
Okay.
But salaries also tend to be higher there, so it often balances out. And if you're willing to live outside of the big cities, the cost of living can be much more affordable.
So it's like most places, the cost of living really depends on where you choose to live and your lifestyle choices.
Exactly.
What about the multicultural aspect of Australia? How has that shaped their society?
Immigration has played a huge role. in shaping modern Australia. It's brought an incredible richness of cultures, languages, and traditions to the country, making it a truly diverse and vibrant society.
English is the main language, right? But I imagine there are tons of other languages spoken throughout the country.
Oh, yeah. You'll hear everything from Mandarin and Arabic to Vietnamese and Italian.
Wow.
And of course, many indigenous languages are still spoken in different parts of the country.
Yeah, that linguistic diversity is a real testament to their history of welcoming people from all over the world. And I bet you can see that diversity in their food culture as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Huh.
Australian cuisine has come a long way from the traditional meat and three veg dishes.
Okay.
Modern Australian cuisine is incredibly diverse and innovative, and it draws inspiration from both its multicultural heritage and the amazing fresh local ingredients that are available.
Okay, I have to ask about the wine. I've heard that Australia produces some world-class wines.
Oh, they do. Their wine regions are known for their quality and diversity.
Yeah.
They produce everything from crisp Sauvignon Blancs to bold Shirazes.
Okay, thanks.
And don't forget about their craft beer scene, which is absolutely booming.
Really?
Yeah, there are all these innovative breweries popping up all over the country.
So they've got the food, they've got the wine,
They've got it all.
beautiful landscapes, a laid-back lifestyle.
Mm.
I'm starting to understand why Australia consistently ranks so highly in those quality of life surveys.
It's a country that has so much to offer.
It really does.
But, as we discussed earlier, Australia is also grappling with a complex past.
Right, we talked about the impact of colonization on Indigenous Australians. It's a challenging topic, but an important one to understand.
Absolutely. We mentioned the Mabo case and the recognition of native title, but the journey towards reconciliation is ongoing.
Yeah, what are some of the challenges that Australia is facing in achieving true reconciliation with Indigenous Australians?
Well, there's still a significant gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians when it comes to things like life expectancy, health outcomes,
Right.
education levels, employment rates.
Wow, those are some serious inequalities.
Mm.
What are the root causes of these disparities, and what's being done to address them?
These inequalities are really the result of historical injustices and systemic issues that continue to affect Indigenous communities. There's no easy fix.
Right.
It's a complex problem that requires a multifaceted approach.
So what are some of the steps being taken to close this gap and move towards a more just and equitable society?
Well, there's been a focus on improving access to healthcare and education in Indigenous communities.
Okay.
Land rights are also a key issue, and there are ongoing discussions about treaty making and constitutional recognition for Indigenous Australians.
These seem like really crucial steps in recognizing and addressing past wrongs and empowering Indigenous communities.
And it's also important to acknowledge the role of Indigenous culture and knowledge.
Yeah.
There's growing recognition of the importance of preserving their languages, traditions, and stories.
It sounds like a journey that involves both practical solutions and a shift in attitudes and perspectives.
Exactly. True reconciliation requires a genuine commitment to understanding, respect, and collaboration.
It's a reminder that creating a more just and equitable society is an ongoing process that requires constant effort and a willingness to learn and adapt.
And it's not just the responsibility of the government. Individuals and communities also have a role to play in fostering reconciliation and understanding.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So beyond these big picture issues, what are some of the things that make everyday life? Well, we've covered a lot of ground from ancient history and culture to modern politics, social systems, even their sense of humor.
We have.
But I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
We have.
What else can we uncover about this land down under?
Well, in our final part, we can explore some of the more unusual and surprising aspects of Australia. We'll delve into their unique wildlife, their contributions to science and technology, and maybe even uncover some fun facts that will leave you saying, I didn't know that.
I'm ready for more. Let's dive into the unexpected side of Australia. Okay, we've explored Australia's history and their culture and their politics and even their super laid-back lifestyle. But I have a feeling there's more to uncover. What about like those did you know moments? The quirky, surprising facts that make Australia so unique.
Oh, there are so many. Where do we even begin? For starters, let's talk about their wildlife.
I'll go with it.
When you think of Australia, what comes to mind?
Kangaroos, koalas, maybe some deadly snakes and spiders.
Exactly. Australia is definitely known for its unique and sometimes dangerous creatures. But it's not just the cuddly marsupials or the venomous snakes that make their wildlife so interesting. Remember how we talked about the high endemism of their plants and animals?
You mentioned something like 85% of Australia's plants are found nowhere else on Earth.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a similar story with their animals. This incredible biodiversity has led to some really remarkable creatures.
Like what?
Well, there's the echidna. Have you heard of that one?
I don't think so.
It's a mammal that lays eggs.
Whoa, what?
Yeah, and then there's the platypus, a semi-aquatic mammal with a duck bill and venomous spurs.
Okay, those sound like something out of a fantasy novel.
I know, right?
It's amazing how evolution has produced such unique creatures in Australia.
It really shows you the power of isolation and adaptation. But all of this unique biodiversity also faces challenges. Things like habitat loss, invasive species, climate change are all threats to Australia's delicate ecosystems.
So it's not just about admiring these incredible creatures, there's a responsibility to protect them as well.
Absolutely. Conservation efforts are crucial to make sure these species survive and that Australia's natural heritage is preserved for future generations.
It's a good reminder that with great natural beauty comes great responsibility.
Well said. Speaking of responsibility, Australia has also made significant contributions to science and technology.
Really? What are some examples? I wouldn't have guessed that Australia was like a hub for innovation.
Well, for one, did you know that Wi-Fi technology owes a lot to Australian scientists?
No way.
Yeah, their research at the CSIRO, which is Australia's national science agency, played a huge role in developing the wireless technology we use every single day.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah.
So the next time I connect to Wi-Fi, I can thank Australia for making my life a little bit easier.
Exactly. Give them a shout out. What other innovations have they contributed to? Well, how about this one? The black box flight recorder.
Oh, yeah.
Essential for investigating aircraft accidents.
Right.
That was invented in Australia.
That is incredible. That's a game changer for aviation safety. It seems like Australians have a knack for solving practical problems.
They do, and they've been pushing boundaries in other areas, too. For instance, the world's first feature-length narrative film, The Story of the Kelly Gang, was made in Australia all the way back in 1906.
Oh, wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
I love that they were pioneers in filmmaking.
Mm.
It makes me wonder what other hidden gems we might find in Australia's cultural history.
Oh, there are always more discoveries to be made. And speaking of discoveries, here's a surprising fact. Australia has the highest rate of skin cancer in the world.
Oh, that's a bit of a downer after all this positive stuff. Why is that?
Well, it's a few things combined. They have a mainly fair-skinned population, a lot of sunshine, and a culture that has, historically embraced being outdoors.
Right.
But thankfully, there's growing awareness of sun safety, and Australia's actually been a leader in creating public health campaigns to encourage people to protect themselves from the sun.
It's a good reminder that even a country as seemingly idyllic as Australia has its challenges.
Yeah, and it highlights the importance of balancing that love of being outdoors with responsible practices.
For sure. Okay, I'm ready for some more of those fun facts. What else have you got?
How about this? Did you know that the surf life-saving movement with those iconic red and yellow flags started in Australia?
Really? Huh. That makes sense, though. They have such a strong beach culture.
Yeah, it grew out of this need to protect swimmers from those strong currents and rough surf conditions that are common on Australian beaches.
It's amazing how something as simple as red and yellow flags has become a symbol of safety and really a testament to Australia's commitment to protecting its people.
It's a great example of how their cultural practices have evolved to address specific challenges and become a part of their national identity.
We've covered so much in this deep dive: ancient history, modern politics, the environment culture, even some quirky fun facts.
I know, it's been quite a journey from the dreaming of the Aboriginal people to the technological innovations of their scientists, from the vast outback to the bustling cities.
It's amazing how a country can be so full of contrasts and yet feel so cohesive.
It's like they've woven together all these different threads, their indigenous heritage, their colonial past, their immigrant stories, their love of the land, their sense of humor, to create this truly unique and vibrant tapestry.
I completely agree. It's been so eye-opening learning about Australia. I'm already feeling inspired to dig deeper and learn even more.
That's the beauty of a deep dive. It's just the beginning. It sparks your curiosity and makes you want to keep exploring.
Exactly. Well, to all our listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of Australia. We hope you've gained a deeper understanding of this incredible country and that you'll continue to discover its many wonders.
And remember, there's always more to learn. So keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep an open mind. Who knows what surprising discoveries you might make along the way.